Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host.
How are you,
Daniel,
Dr. Paul?
Good to see you.
Good to be with you today.
Okay, very good. You know, the enemy out there that's promoting this nonsense and causing our country to go to the dogs or go to the streets for various reasons, because it's not all coronavirus, it's not all the brutal killing of George Floyd, and it's not, but in my estimation, it has a lot to do with basic economic policy, which is sort of the quiet issue because nobody wants to talk about that, and yet it's pretty darn important. But right now, the opposition have really depended on the coronavirus to practice what they believe in, and that is the lockdown, house arrest and abuse, disciplining the people, making the people bow, and would lock themselves into houses. And this is something that has been around, but it's significantly changed, and they're trying to wean, people want to be weaned off it. There are some diehards that think it should last forever, and some diehards, unfortunately, will probably win the day and keep some of these regulations. I don't think we'll ever, get rid of all of them. So it is a danger, even though right now they're worried. They said, we're losing our enemy.
Yeah.
The virus is really not there. It's essentially not a virus anymore. And they know it, and they're backing off. And even some national experts that were, pumping this stuff up are saying, the reaction was really a scam.
Yeah.
And that's a growing sentiment. And I think the people are recognizing that. Certainly what we've talked about in the last day or two is this inconsistency of if you want to gather together by the tune of thousands of people and intermix and not be more than 2 inches away from people. Oh, if you're doing the Lord's work and you're trying to stir up a little bit of trouble, that's okay. But if you're not there, you can't go back to normal activities. You still have to go to social distancing. So they never give up. But I want to open with a quote from Armstrong Economics. He's a good free market person, and he wrote today having to do with the enemy and also this whole subject, which I think reveals some of the attitude that goes on. Let me get this up here. He goes on and he says, more and more doctors are coming out against the COVID-19 scam. Trump needs to convene a public hearing and let the other side be heard. Put it on national television to expose the corruption in journalism. Now we have the very firm who claim that the drug recommended by Trump did not work. They were official-like,
Yeah.
They have minimal staff, which includes this will be helpful. It includes a science fiction writer and an adult porn star.
Wow.
And that's the authority. This is causing a bit of attention and outrage because guess who reproduced this and made it credible? Lancet. Lancet's well known, for being reputable. It's sort of like the New England Journal of Medicine, and who knows where their reputation will go. But this is back to this: you can't trust anybody, and people get in bed with government, and this mixture of medicine and government, it's untrustworthy. And then you have the corporations making money off this whole thing. So, then they published this study. And even when Lancet published it, you're supposed to check things out. Journalists, that's, in the old days, they used to do that. Check out the data. No verification. And then you wonder how they got ahead. And, then we have the Prime Minister of England who's gung-ho over all this stuff. So, and we've wondered at times, how did it ever become so international? And it seems like they're real professionals, just not a couple TV stations in this country getting together and sharing notes before the evening news comes out. Yeah. I mean, this was a real global attack on independent journalism. And that probably is one of the biggest problems that we face today. But I think that we are making headway. It's not like we don't get any message out, and more people are doing it. The fact that the doctors some of them are switching their viewpoint, and I think this is great that they'll do this. But why did they ever go along with it? And we do know that the doctors participated in the statistics too. Everybody died from coronavirus, even if they had a positive test and were never sick and never spread the disease. They skewed the statistics to show how deadly it was. It was spreading like crazy, and they made these predictions that were threatening. Half the population would die. This extremism. But I think that's getting knocked down a bit, and hopefully we contributed a little bit to that awakening.
Yeah, but meanwhile, 40 million people out of work, and untold suicides and things of that nature. But, we titled this, "The Narrative Has Failed," and it is failing, and it has failed. And there are so many cracks in this edifice that it's coming down before our eyes. And, we're pleased to be right, but we're not happy about the damage that's been done. But there are so many other things. We saw something in CNBC, this is hardly a conspiracy site, talking about this battle that's going on because a lot of doctors, particularly some doctors in Italy, are saying that this virus just doesn't exist anymore. This is Dr. Alberto Zangrillo, head of intensive care at San Raffaele Hospital in Milan, the epicenter of Italy's coronavirus outbreak. He said, quote, "The swabs that were performed over the last 10 days showed a viral load in quantitative terms that was absolutely infinitesimal compared to the ones carried out on patients a month or two ago." And so this debate is raging. We talked about it the other day, how the British team looking for a vaccine are saying the virus is dying too quick. We're not going to be able to get a vaccine together. So, and then what else? They said, when the states start opening up, oh my gosh, you're going to have huge spikes. It's going to be the end of the world. Well, we got a couple of things. Remember we talked about the Lake of the Ozarks on Memorial Day. Everyone went out there, and all the lockdowners were tutting, oh yeah, these guys are all going to die. Well, here's the Missouri health director. He said there are no new COVID-19 cases from the Lake of the Ozarks crowds, the Missouri health director says. All these people getting together, nothing happened. They said when Georgia opens up, oh, it's going to be a slaughterhouse. The New York Times laughed and said, oh, it'll be a great place to go and die. And let's look what happened in Georgia. Look at this chart, Dr. Paul. You can see around mid-April is when they started opening up. And this is COVID-19 deaths over time. It's a bell curve. It's just like it always is in a virus. And look where it is now in 3 June. It's almost completely gone. There was no spike. Everything they said was untrue. But what remains is really just a scorched earth.
Don't you think that chart could be used by somebody defending Trump? Because that's what he said at the beginning. It was too bad he couldn't have been a little bit forceful. But the conditions were such that he wasn't able to move and didn't move, but he was right. And of course, he has defied conventional wisdom. But they almost seem like they're disappointed that they don't have the enemy to deal with. And the people who have advocated these social craziness, they're taking the credit for that chart. And you mentioned how it happens. It's just part of the way viruses work. But they're out there, they have the nerve to cause all this trouble and all this tragedy and all this violation of our liberties, which is still lingering. There's still a lot of people, they join into mob psychology easily, but it takes a lot of weaning to get people thinking in a different fashion. I think it's going to come, but they actually want to take credit for the backing off of the virus because they did the social engineering and this lockdown. It was very, very beneficial. They don't give up easily.
Yeah. Well, we know that the strictest lockdown states are the ones that had the worst coronavirus outbreak. And that's simply a fact. And part of that is really the sad tale that we've been telling over and over, which is that at least half of those who died from the coronavirus in the U.S. died because of the horrific practices of returning sick coronavirus patients to the confined space of a long-term care facility. And that's what caused it to spread. So if you remove that massive error, maybe not an error, if you remove that, you see a far less. You'll cut it in half and probably even more. And of course, we talked about this before the show, this will demonstrate the insanity of cooking the books on coronavirus. According to Deborah Bricks and all the experts who made who put the criteria for a coronavirus death, George Floyd, the person who was killed by a police officer, technically will enter the ranks as a coronavirus death because he tested positive for coronavirus afterwards. So he goes into the link as well.
If that doesn't wake up people, what will? Because they're immediately saying, well, that's distortion. You're distorting the truth. But that is the truth because they neglected, they, matter of fact, wanted to deny, don't even tell us if you've tested them. Just if they have had some symptoms.
Yeah.
So that would be all it would be in order for them to mess up the books. But
and we'd agree that it's distorted, but then how many others were also distorted? You know, okay, we agree with you.
You know, I hear the military is coming back from overseas, which really isn't true, but at least the announcement is the 82nd Airborne's coming back, and they're going to Washington, D.C. They're bringing Black Hawks and Chinook helicopters, and they're ready to fight the enemy. And, of course, when people see what's going on in the streets, I can understand people when the reaction is, why does anybody let this happen? What do we have our police for? And if you need the military, use the military to deal with these hoodlums. And that is something that you can understand. But we don't know, how long this is going to last if the people, give support to this. But the military coming back is a big issue, and this is where Trump has lost a little, politically. But of course, that comes from the liberal media too. Who knows where the people stand? Because I think ultimately the people will be more militant oriented than I might be, because I'm weary of the military coming in and getting involved. But they are coming back. They are here. But my idea of always saying, bring the troops home, this doesn't exactly fit.
Yeah.
It's coming home. Maybe there's a little bit of benefit. We're not antagonizing them, but we need to get our Navy out of the South China Sea, and we don't need to be in the Black Sea antagonizing the Russians and putting on sanctions on Iran. That's what we need to be doing. But if we had the right foreign policy, this money would come back, not in the form of helicopters in Washington, D.C. It would come back and say, hey, we don't need this military budget quite so much. Why don't we cut the taxes on the American people, because we're not going to have socialized medicine, which is atrocious, because it is the principle of socialized medicine that allowed this scam to exist, and the universities are involved, the drug companies are involved, the politicians are involved, and so this would be a different story. But a lot of people don't quite understand that, nor do they understand how the markets work, that if you cut the budget, then this helps the people. And there's a reason for the people to have this false trust, is because they don't raise the taxes. They hide the taxes by just printing the money, which is every bit as detrimental. Ultimately, it'll be a deadly problem for us to face, because there's no limits on the spending. And this little tokenism of, well, this cut the budget. They're not going to cut the budget. They're not going to cut the military. And this is not going to suffice. But the basic principle is there. Bring the troops home. It does make more sense than us aggravating the whole world.
Yeah, that's true. And this whole kind of brouhaha that's come up, though, over Trump claiming and really sending in the 82nd Airborne to quell the protests is kind of it's not a tempest in a teapot, but for us it's difficult because we kind of say we disagree with both sides. It's not a good idea to bring in the active duty military to put down what's happening in the cities. Certainly the National Guard is sufficient. However, the reaction, and of course the left media, I call them the liberal media, eats it up. When you have Mattis, former Secretary of Defense, speaking out to Jeffrey Goldberg at the Atlantic, big neocon, and saying that Trump is a threat to the Constitution. Here's another quote: Donald Trump is the first president in my lifetime who does not try to unite the American people. He tries to divide us, is what he's saying about Trump. This is what he's saying about his former boss. Very, very political, of course, very amplified. See, even Trump's former, defense guy says it. What's interesting is I kind of looked this up, and for a guy who tries to divide America, and I'm not defending Trump, but he did better with blacks and Hispanics in 2016 than Romney did in 2012. I don't call that dividing people, right? If anything, he seems to be uniting. He has a weird way of doing it. We'll all agree. But then there's Esper himself, the current defense secretary. Of course, this all goes back to what we're saying. Trump is pretty bad at choosing personnel, unfortunately. The current defense secretary, okay, he's completely against bringing in the active duty troops. You would sympathize with that. But when he lost the argument inside the Oval Office, he came out and started whining to the press about it. I was all against this, and I don't know why I was dragged out here for this photo op. This is terrible, this sort of thing. It's just not the kind of thing you do when you have a boss like that. And so it does raise the issue that both sides, I think, are probably wrong on this.
Well, when he did that, he actually was serving the interests of those who want to divide us.
Yeah.
and Mattis was actually a little bit worse than this. He gave that spiel about how horrible the president was and mentioned the shortcomings. But I thought his was the most divisive of all of them. It sort of goes along with my opinion that the people who shout the loudest about segregation and racism are the worst. So these guys are saying we think the president's the worst one for uniting the people, and yet the ones who are doing the shouting are certainly the ones that are arguing for more divisiveness.
More divisiveness, and it's working. It's getting lapped up. Well, we want to also go back and touch on our own dear state, some of our adopted homes, some of us longtime residents. But how we started the show was talking about how the virus is dying, and it clearly is dying. There are no spikes where they claimed. They're still warning about a second wave. We'll see if that happens. It doesn't look like it will. Unfortunately, our own governor here, Greg Abbott, we beat up on him a little bit. He's done some good things, but on this issue, he's pretty bad, Dr. Paul. And it just almost seems like he put together a task force to come up with a plan to reopen, and by golly, he's going to stick to it no matter what happens. And so yesterday, he put in his phase 3 of the reopening. It's not anything to write home about. I think, in fact, we might have some graphics on it if we have that. It's just crazy. You were able to operate at 25% capacity. Now you can have 50% capacity. If you have a bar, you can sit down, but you can't stand up, and you dare not loiter. So basically, you go to the bar, gulp down a few drinks, and run off. It's crazy. You can stand 4 feet apart now, but not 6. But it used to be 6 feet, now 4 feet, as if somehow Corona lost the ability to jump that extra 2 feet and get you
Getting
when you're
weaker.
standing at the bar. So it's very disappointing. I'm monitoring a few Facebook groups that want to open Texas back up. I don't know how many, 4 million people unemployed, a huge number. They're furious with Abbott for not only this, but for his very shady contact tracing deal with that company, $350 million. So this phase 3 of reopening is very, very, very weak beer.
The closure was very, very bad, and it has caused a lot of problems. And this sort of thing, when they go, you can come back, you have to stay at home. You can come back 25%. Oh, now we're going to move you up to 50%. I'd call that a little bit of micromanaging. How do they know anything about
science.
that? Either freedom works or it doesn't work. Yeah. And this idea that they can measure the distance that the virus can jump, it should be laughable. People should say, what are they talking about? Oh, we understand that, and that's why if you want to go out and knock down buildings and riot, we understand that. We should permit you to do that. We don't want to restrain you from doing that. And it's typical of mentality of micromanaging the importance of political figures, because the assumption should be that people will know what's right. Matter of fact, people know how to measure risk, and they've done it for a long time. Even serious things, a lot more serious even than that we just went through. It turns out this one wasn't very serious at all, but we've gone through a lot of things that have been very serious, and people get to make the decision. Even this whole thing about protecting private property, it's a mess to decide that we have to have a real free market defense of private property, but we should at least talk about it and know what it's like. But in the old days, if you were in a dangerous area and you knew there was a risk of rioting and all, because there's not enough policemen to make you safe, that the safety comes from people protecting their property. But now, if you go in and protect your property and happen to use a weapon, you're the criminal.
You're the criminal. Well, I'm going to close by resurrecting a segment that I did a few weeks ago that I kind of like, the villain of the week. And there is a villain this, well, there's a lot of villains this week. It's hard to choose. But I'm going to choose one because this is the person that I wouldn't say I enjoy, but I'm particularly irritated with, and that's Lina Hidalgo, the 29-year-old judge of Harris County. If you remember, the first one who locked it all down, not even an attorney, by the way, locked the whole thing down. You can't go out of your house. You better wear a mask. You better close your business. You better not go outside. You better not even breathe unless I give you permission to breathe. Well, guess what? Good old Lina Hidalgo is taking a different tack this week. She's changing her tune a little bit because there's some protests going on that she thinks are pretty peachy keen. Even though she's extended the stay-at-home order until June 10th, she released a statement yesterday, and I'll just read a little bit from it. Over the past several days, I and our Office of Emergency Management have remained in close touch with Mayor Turner and the City of Houston regarding the protests. We stand ready to provide any additional tools or resources they may require to keep our community safe and look forward to working together to honor the life of George Floyd by promoting meaningful action, peace, and justice for all. Meaningful action, i.e. protests. She's all for it now. She's changed her tune.
Well, we switched her position.
Where we won.
Yeah, don't you remember when she called up and we had that little conversation with her? We have conversation with people that generally don't return their call. We just have conversation with ourselves and our very strong supporters out there that listen and understand what we're trying to do here. But you know, the reason I don't get totally reassured about all this, because this enemy is disappearing. It's all going to fail. The economic system is going to fail. The monetary system is going to fail. Our foreign policy system is going to fail. Well, why can you say anything positive? Because it's going to be replaced, if it's up to us and others who will wake up, with a different system. And this has to go down. Of course, our worst enemies, the Marxists, they say, yeah, that's right. We want to bring it down and make this a really, truly Marxist society. So what I suspect what will happen is, let's say the coronavirus settles down, and even the George Floyd demonstration, that gets settled down, there will be another enemy declared. We're not quite there yet. We are not at the point where people have admitted to the financial and moral bankruptcy of this country and do the fundamental things that are necessary to restore the republic. So there will be another enemy, and it'll come as soon as this one becomes so weak that they can't do anything. And right now, it looks like the coronavirus is very weak, but the whole thing about police brutality and white supremacy and all these things going on, there's a lot of hatred in there, and it's hard to reverse it once they build up this hatred. But I don't know what the enemy will be, and nobody really predicted that there would be a police brutality episode where somebody gets killed so needlessly, but there'll be something that they're going to grasp. They're waiting and watching, and what they have proven is they are much more organized than I ever dreamed of. And when I read, and we talked about the British and all the propaganda being in Lancet and these kind of things, so it is very international, but we still have to present the case for personal liberty. It's been known about for a long time. It's been very, very successful. It's the most successful form of government ever known. If you just eliminate most of the functions of government and let people make their own mind and just seeks the nonviolent position, that is available to us. And believe me, the recovery can be very, very fast. This smoldering problem that we have, and this idea that we can divvy up liberty, 25% this week, 50% next week, 75% next week, and it's all going to be. No, if they're beating the living daylights out of liberty, just stop it. Let the people alone. Let the people go back to what they're best at, taking care of themselves and their family and working, and let them keep what they earn and get rid of all this nonsense, the tax through inflation and the IRS and all this authoritarian stuff. It's going to end. So what we have to do and work so hard is to present the case to the people, say, I don't know why anybody would pick anything other than the concept of personal liberty. And that's why we get energetic about promoting this message in the Institute for Peace and Prosperity. I think that sounds like a pretty good idea. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.